I once came from the untouched fields of my village, where the air was sweet with the scent of blossoms, and the sun warmed the earth beneath my feet. But now, as I stand on this turbulent path through the vast and unforgiving lands of Anatolia, I barely recognize the reflection I see in the battered surface of my shield. The journey that began with noble intentions, a quest for faith and glory, has morphed into an agonizing trial of endurance. Our passage into these war-torn territories has been nothing short of nightmarish. The dry, cracked earth beneath our feet glimmered with the promise of sustenance long turned to dust. Days stretched into weeks, each filled with the gnawing pangs of hunger that have become our unwelcome companions. I remember the sun beating down mercilessly, a fiery eye watching our misery, as we stumbled through desolate landscapes, ever watchful for signs of relief. As we marched deeper into the Turkish lands, desperation seeped into our souls like poison, cutting sharper than any blade. With every passing mile, our provisions dwindled, and the once proud army began to resemble a herd of straggling sheep led to slaughter, fearful and weak. The sound of our boots on the parched ground became the dirge of hope, punctuated only by the groans of those whose strength evaporated into the dry air. It was then that illness struck, swift and ruthless. Before us lay not just an enemy to vanquish, but an invisible foe ready to claim our lives. The fever draped over us like a grim shroud, turning the valiant into the fallen. Comrades I once knew as the embodiment of strength now lay pallid and breathless, writhing in their own agony. Each dawn brought with it the grim realization of loss, temporary perhaps, yet profoundly crippling. A sense of paranoia began to take root, twisting our minds, making monsters of shadows. Every rustle of leaves bore the weight of an ambush. Every whispered conversation ignited rumors of disloyalty. Fear became our constant companion, gnawing at the edges of our sanity. What had once united us now turned into a source of division. I felt the whispers of blame wrap around us, as brothers turned on one another, eyes narrowed and hands itching for steel. With each quarrel and accusation, we descended into moral decay. The very men I stood beside in solemn oath became mere echoes of valiance, replaced by the grumbles of discontent and the creaking of treacherous hearts. I witnessed once honorable knights forsake the values we had sworn to uphold, their humanity stripped away like bark from a felled tree. Robbery crept in, invading our camp at night, while the leaders turned a blind eye to the acts of desperation. We became the scavengers of the battlefield, feeding off the remains of hope as if it were carrion. We had come to fight for God, to reclaim the sacred land, yet I observed brothers drag down the fallen to steal whatever meager possessions they clutched. The sound of clashing steel was drowned by the echo of our growing despair, the very essence of our crusade now tainted by shame and guilt. With doubt festering in our hearts, the light of faith began to waver. The sacred banners that once inspired us now felt heavy and burdensome, filled with the sins of betrayal. How could one believe in a divine plan when brothers died not from iron, but from the very doubts we harbored? I looked into the eyes of my fellow warriors, searching for solidarity, only to find a hall of mirrors reflecting the chaos that resided within us. Then came the siege of Antiochia city that loomed like a dark guardian on our horizon, shrouded in the whispers of ancient battles and losses. The very sight ignited a flicker of hope, mingling with desperation, and we gathered our ranks to lay siege. But the walls of Antioch were not just of stone. They were steeped in the resolve of its defenders and filled with the echoes of countless cries. As arrows flew through the air and clashed against the fortifications, I felt the blood surge through my veins, mixing with the adrenaline that coursed, igniting both fear and fury. Yet, as we fought to breach those walls, I felt an emptiness gnaw at my core, part of me that whispered horrors I could no longer ignore. I took sweeping glances across the battlefield, seeing men I once admired consumed by the same despair that had claimed my spirit. In that chaotic struggle, a flicker of recognition sparked within Maya, realization that I was not the hero I had envisioned, but rather a vessel of destruction. The cacophony of war raged around, and in a swift moment of desperation, I was thrust into my first act of violence, the crushing realization that I was no longer innocent. I could feel the weight of the blade in my hand, the unmistakable warmth of someone's life fading away beneath me. Time slowed to a crawl as I stood there, heart racing, feeling the hands of the fallen grasping for understanding. What had become of me? Was I truly capable of killing for a cause that had been sullied by fear and doubt? The inky shadows of regret etched themselves into the tapestry of my Sula, haunting reminder of the innocence that lay wounded somewhere amongst all the chaos. As the siege continued, the walls of Antioch grew closer to crumbling, yet in me an internal battle raged that threatened to consume my very being. I rebelled against the mindscape shaped by what a landscape tarnished by my choices and the choices of those around me. Just as hope flickered at the edge of despair, a sharp bolt of destiny struck from the fray, a piercing arrow kissing my heart. In those final moments, as darkness surged, bitterness followed close behind. Perhaps in a true act of fate, I lay there pondering the weight of every choice that had brought me to this point. Did my hands have blood upon them? Yes, they did. But the struggle didn't lie merely within the tangible act of violence. It spiraled deeper into the essence of existence and the choices that shaped us beyond the battlefield. In death, I stumbled upon an understanding cloaked in anguish. The war had battered every fiber of my being, leaving me hollow and void. Yet it was my mortality that flickered closest to the fleeting hope of redemption. As the world around me faded into darkness, I understood that these battles fought on blood-soaked soils were perhaps the echoes of a greater war within ourselves. And so, dear listener, if you, too, feel the weight of warfare upon your heart, know the journeys through the torment of conflict shape us in ways we may not understand. Each path carved, each confrontation faced it, reveals the essence of who we are. Join me in the next episode as we continue unearthing the truths buried beneath the scars of war. And remember, our stories are what bind us. If you found a connection in this tale, subscribe to Medieval Stories, and together we shall traverse through history's darkest corridors. The pain ebbed and flowed like the tides, and as I lay there, gasping for breath, the fight within me flickered like a dying flame. I could feel the cold embrace of death creeping in, a grim reminder of my own fragility amid the chaos of war. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by the thick haze of doubt and guilt that enveloped me. I had come to this foreign land seeking glory and salvation, yet the reality was a bitter mockery of my dreams. I had been taught that valor was the highest virtue, that honor was carved out of bravery, yet the sword I had raised to defend our cause had been stained with the blood of an enemy who had once been just as human as I. I thought of my family back home, their laughter, their warmth, and the safety of our hearth. How naive I had been, believing that valor could be catalogued neatly among titles and conquests. In the heart of war, It was an illusion forgotten in the shadows of violence and death. As my consciousness wavered, I was thrown back to memories of my youth, of idyllic days spent roaming the meadows, battling imaginary foes in the name of valor and virtue. I thought I could be a true knight, following a righteous path. I was seduced by tales of glorious battles, of heroes whose names would echo through time. Yet as the blood spilled and darkness settled about me, I wondered how many felt the same way provided they survived. The image of my comrades flashed in and out of focus, their faces a mix of hope and despair. The bonds we once shared were now woven with threads of distrust and cynicism. The camaraderie we so proudly boasted had crumbled amidst the suffocating grip of starvation and fear. I was surrounded by men who laughed with hollow hearts, their eyes reflecting the death of their dreams as they clung to each other, lost in a sea that threatened to swallow us whole. Suddenly, a great crash stirred me from my haze. Anticipation coiled tightly within the army as the earth trembled beneath the weight of an assault. The defenders of Antioch were no longer idle. They looked upon us as wolves incited to feverish hunger. The sun dipped low, casting ominous shadows, and we braced ourselves for the worst. My body may have been frail, but in that moment, a whisper traveled through me, a call to rise and fight again, a desperate flicker of the man I once was. Rallying cries thundered across the camp, urging the daring among us to rise from the ashes of doubt and despair. It was a call to arms that echoed through the halls of our resolve. With trembling hands, I grasped my sword, steeling myself against the cacophony that swelled around me. As the embrace of death hovered ever closer, I refused to go silently, to be another forgotten soul swept away by the tides of suffering. I stumbled back to the fray, resolved to leave my mark, be it in honor or infamy. The battle resumed with renewed ferocity, the weapons clashing, the cries of men merging into a chorus of anguish and fury. The air thickened with the scent of sweat and desperation, and undulating chaos enveloped us. In that moment, I felt both alive and dead, a mere specter fighting against the inevitable. The struggle surged through me. I was no longer just a pawn on the battlefield, but a man riding the currents of fate, grappling with the choices that shaped my existence. I struck out at foes before me, the brutality of our fight reverberating deep down within me, marking the lines where innocence bled into guilt. Each time I ended a life, I felt the duality of freedom and entrapment. I was liberated from my own fears, but shackled by the weight of their demise. Then I saw the glimmer of steel as another arrow flew across the field. It struck true, embedded in a distant warrior's chest, and he crumpled to the ground like a straw doll. The life drained away from his eyes, replaced with the glassy stare of defeat. It was a tragic dance, one that played out tirelessly on fields stained with the blood of many. With every swing of my sword, I became a part of that relentless, cycling, unwilling participant in a tragedy from which there seemed no escape. The siege of Antioch raged on through that tumultuous day, my will rising and falling like the tide, even as ennui threatened to sweep me away. There was a fleeting moment of clarity amidst chaos when I caught sight of the banners fluttering above the walls, a glimmer of hope intertwined with the burden of despair. Each color told a story, a tale of humanity's desire to fight for belief, for loyalty, yet standing against the reality of lives caught in the web of war. Yet as the sky darkened and the distant thunder of conflict rumbled, I felt a shifter, tangible tension that vibrated through the air. We were wearing one another down, breaking the brave spirits that had once surged high with the promise of a glorious victory. The walls of Antioch still loomed, stubborn and invulnerable, our forces struggling to break through the defenses, erected not only from stone, but from the spirit of those within. And as the sheen of dusk kissed the landscape, bodies began to pile upon one another, the cost of our ambition painted scarlet and black. I could see the shadows of my companions' once proud, menno hollow shells, worn by faith, exposed by ceaseless doubt. We had come to reclaim a land viewed as holy, yet we left behind a battlefield paved with our own disillusionment. Hope flickered like a dying star as I faced the night, a somber testament to the futility of our endeavors. I was lost in a realm of darkness, mired in contradiction, fighting not only an enemy but the very reflection of my Sulon endless valley of torment. It was then that the truth struck me like an arrow to the heart. The greatest battles waged were those fought within, masked by the guise of victory. I took a moment to breathe, to gather within me the remnants of honor that had drawn me to this path in the first place. Like a phoenix born of ash, I vowed to find not just solace on the battlefield, but a path back to the lighter semblance of peace buried amongst the cries of war. With that thought etched in my mind, I found purpose again, ready to brave the unknown, stepping decisively into the fray of man and memory alike. As darkness fell, the cries of the battlefield transformed into whispers of camaraderie and despair. I stood tall among the ruins, knowing the path ahead would be riddled with trials and tribulations. Yet, I also understood that somewhere within that turbulence, amidst the carnage and clarity, lay the promise of redemption, a journey I was bound to pursue, even when it led me through shadows deep and dark. Do you, too, feel that stirring inside, a call to face the demons that lie hidden? With each tale we unravel, we move closer to understanding our shared humanity. Join me for the next chapter on this harrowing journey. Subscribe to Medieval Stories, and let us navigate the labyrinth of history together. The horizon stretched into an endless void, an expanse marred by the darkness of approaching night. Yet, among the shadows, a fire ignited deep within me, a flicker of hope rekindled amidst despair. The siege of Antioch had become more than a mere battle. It had morphed into a crucible, a brutal test of not just our physical endurance, but the very essence of our spirits. I pressed forward, gripping my sword tightly, its weight becoming familiar, a partner in this relentless struggle. The air around me crackled with tension, filled with the cries of warriors charging into the fray and the clash of arms ringing out like an insistent drum. I was no longer just a participant in this quest. I was a part of something far greater, a sea of souls battling against the tide of fate. As dawn approached, the first light pierced the veil of night, revealing the grotesque tableau stretched out before me. The battlefield lay scattered with the remnants of both sides, bodies entwined in a grim embrace, testament to the heavy toll of war. The stench of blood and sweat filled the air, an acrid mix that clung to my skin and seeped into my very being. Each step forward was dictated by the heavy memories of those we had lost, men who had once laughed, fought valiantly, and believed fiercely in our cause. Yet even amid the chaos, there were glimmers of humanity that flickered like lanterns in the pitch of night. I caught sight of a soldier kneeling beside a fallen comrade, weeping openly, his grief raw and palpable. It was a moment that sliced through the fog of conflict, reminding me that behind the armor and weapons lay men who felt just as deeply a shared burden. a mutual longing for solace framed by our tragic circumstances. The men around me, eager to chase glory, now fought with hollow desperation. Our desire for victory shifting under the weight of loss. The fabric of our army, once vibrant and unified, started to unravel, each thread tugged away by the forces of doubt and despair. I recognized that our greatest adversary lay not in the fortified walls of Antioch or the ferocity of its defenders, but in our own hearts. We were, in many ways, our enemies. It was within this turmoil that I began to witness the true spirit of resilience, of force that transcended the anguish and dread enveloping us. In the valleys of despair, courage surfaced. I watched a fellow knight help a wounded comrade to safety, his movements unrelenting despite the peril that surrounded him. As if guided by an unerring moral compass, he placed others before himself, a flicker of light, illuminating the dark crevices of lost faith. This is what it means to be a true crusader, I realized. It wasn't merely about victory on the battlefield, but about bearing witness to the humanity we all shared, the compassion that remained intact, even in the harshest of circumstances. With renewed resolve, I rejoined my brothers, rallying them to remember the bonds we had forged through trials and those we had lost. I urged them to lean into the memories of those who had fallen, not as an anchor to drag us down, but as a beacon of what honor truly meant. We were more than soldiers in arms. We were men bound by shared quests, suffering, and the flickering hope that still lingered in the recesses of our shattered spirits. As we pressed forward, it struck me that this battle would not be won through brute strength alone. It required unity, a steadfastness forged from shared experiences. Together we could challenge the darkness, confront the very fears that threatened to envelop us. As we approached the towering walls of Antioch, echoes of ancient struggles seeped into my veins, energizing me with a tenacious will to defy our circumstances. The battle resumed in full fervor as we charged once more, swords clashing against shields, our war cries mingling with the sounds of desperation around us. As we attempted to breach the fortifications, I could see the determined faces of the defenders, resolute in their stance against the invading force. Each man held his ground, bolstered not just by stone walls, but by the unwavering belief in their cause, much like we had at the outset of our journey. And then, in the chaos, I faced an unforeseen enemy. A defensor, his features obscured by a helmet, charged towards me with the speed of a desperate spirit. I blocked his initial strike, the clang of metal against metal reverberating through my bones. He fought not just for his city, but for every soul that had once called it home. It was a clash that transcended mere combat. It was a confrontation of ideologies, the embodiment of faith wrestling with fear. As we exchanged blows, I felt a recognition. He, too, was a man driven by the same primal instincts, striving to fulfill his duty and protect all he held dear. For a fleeting moment, the haze of animosity lifted, and I saw in him not just an adversary, but a reflection of my struggling brother-in-arms who believed in the righteousness of his path. With renewed clarity, I remembered my purpose not as a mere soldier, but as a defender of those principles that had inspired my journey. In my heart, I grasped that while battles are fought with steel and might, the true essence of our quest resides in the spirit of empathy and courage, the unwavering desire to find common ground even amidst chaos. Veering away from our deadly dance, I surrendered to the instinct within. I thrust my sword forward, and while it struck true, it did not bring the finality I expected. Instead, I saw understanding within his eyes, a shared moment amid the clash of destinies. In that singular breath before death, I found communional recognition of our shared humanity that lingered like a specter on the battlefield. With that action, I shifted my focus. Victory no longer served to conquer merely the walls of Antioch, but the barriers that separated us as brothers in arms. In the face of adversity, I found a thread that connected USA's fragile bond of understanding knitted from the shared fabric of our experiences and, dare I say, our suffering. As dawn broke anew, illuminating the horrors depicted upon the land, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. War could not be stricken from the annals of history, nor could cruelty be dismissed as mere madness. But within that chaos, there existed the potential for transformation, the possibility of rising from the ashes of strife, transcending it beyond the slaughter and grief. It is easy to succumb to the allure of vengeance, but as I reflected on the blood spilled upon the earth, I could not help but feel that redemption lies ingrained in our ability to connect amidst the chaos swirling around us. Together, we could forge a path that could lead us from the darkness, signaling that even in war, the heart of a man could shine steadfast and bold, ready to confront the depths and find illumination among the shadows. The flickers of understanding sparked across our ranks as my comrades echoed the cadence of my thoughts. Stepping over the threshold of fear and despair, we worked to reclaim not just the honor of our quest, but also the spirit of brotherhood that had once united us. We pressed forward anew, seeking to bridge the divide, striving to find unity beneath the weight of our burdens. If you feel the call, within a yearning to discover how we may rise above the pagan shadows, join me once more in this journey of hope and resilience. Subscribe to Medieval Stories as we continue to navigate the tides of history, exploring the profound connections that echo through time. Together, we shall rise and find strength in our shared narrative, igniting a flame of understanding that can transcend the darkest of nights. The dawn's light streamed through the smoke and haze, illuminating the faces of my fellow soldiers, a mingled patchwork of hope and desperation, courage and fear. United by a sense of purpose, we charged forward anew, rallying around the remnants of faith that had once ignited our hearts. The clamor of battle rose again, but this time it felt different. It was not merely the clash of steel against steel, but a symphony of souls awakening to a shared mission. With each step forward, the weight of despair began to lift, replaced by a humming energy that surged within us. We had seen loss and grief, but we also bore witness to an emerging solidarity that could not be extinguished. There, among the cries of the fallen, I found my footing no longer just a soldier seeking glory, but a man driven to reclaim not just a city, but the sanctity of our shared humanity. As we pressed against the walls of Antioch, the battle transformed into a dance, a chaotic waltz between hope and desperation. I plunged into the fray, my movements fueled by the desire to protect the lives of those around me. I struck, parried, and forged ahead, relying less on brute strength and more on the exhilaration of fighting alongside those whose bonds had long been obscured by the haze of despair. The defenders were fierce. They exhibited a tenacity that spoke of their will to survive, to protect the land that had cradled them throughout their lives. With every strike, every clash of sword against shield, I sensed their desperation mirrored in the faces of my comrades. The innate urge to survive, to protect one's kin, transcended our belief set. was a primal force that propelled us beyond the realm of conflict into a deeper understanding of what it meant to be human. In that maelstrom of war, I found myself moving in a rhythm that felt almost preordained. Each motion felt instinctual, as if guided by a force far greater than any single battle plan could conceive. I fought not only for my life, but for every soul interwoven in this tumultuous web we called existence. Our struggle had transformed. It was no longer a quest for land or power, but rather for recognition of our collective experience. Then came a moment that forever changed the direction of my journey. A sudden surge of realization struck me, enlightening my path ahead. I was engaged in a duel with another fierce defender, his eyes blazing as we exchanged blows. I could feel the weight of every choice that had led us to this moment pressing upon my shoulders. And then, in the heat of combat, an unexpected sensation washed over me. Empathy for this warrior, this man caught as I was in the gears of fate, wrestling not only for his life, but for the honor of his people. "Stop!" I cried out amidst the chaos, my voice cutting through the clamor of the battlefield like a beacon in the dark. In that instant, time seemed to freeze, and the sounds of violence faded, leaving us suspended in a moment of profound clarity. We are not enemies. We fight for the same reasons to protect what we cherish. The look in my opponent's eyes shifted from the fierce grip of anger to a flicker of confusion and then, finally, understanding. In that fleeting moment, we both recognized the absurdity of our struggle, the reality that, like us, the fallen had sought nothing more than the preservation of their loved ones. For the briefest of breaths, we were united by the bond of our fighter realization that transcended the confines of war. Seeing this revelation reflected back at me, I turned to the men around us, voice steady. We do not need to perish on this battlefield for glory or power. What is glory when so many lives are lost? Peace can be our triumph, an echo that will resonate through the ages. Energized by my words, I dropped my weapon, hoping to signal to my enemy that I sought discussion rather than destruction. Around us, the tide began to shift. One by one, men lowered their arms, the clang of swords replaced by whispers and hesitant glances. The battlefield began to quiet, as if the very earth beneath us acknowledged a truth buried beneath layers of bloodshed. As I extended my hand toward my would-be adversary, I was heartened to watch him lower his sword alongside mine. In that singular act, a bridge began to form, connecting us not through hostility, but through the understanding that even in conflict, humanity prevails. We are brothers in belief, not foes, I implored. Let us find common ground beyond the rage of war, for in this moment we can choose to seek a better path. A heartbeat passed, then another, as the echoes of doubt and fear began to dissolve. The sound of clanking armor fell silent, replaced by a palpable sense of hope growing amidst the wreckage we had created. I saw warriors on both sides hesitantly step forward, some maintaining their own shields yet appearing open to the concept of dialogue. At that moment, as the fragile wall of animosity began to crumble, I sensed a shift, not only in the hearts of those around me, but also within myself. The burdens of vengeance and the weight of honor that had once shackled me began to lessen, making way for a new purpose that rippled through the air like a sacred chant. A collective yearning took root in aspiration for peace that transcended our conflicting loyalties. We stood then on that battlefield, no longer mere pawns of history, but men reclaiming their narratives a chance to mold a different outcome, forged not in blood, but in understanding. In that moment, we found our humanity again among the ruins of what war had wrought, determined to rise from the ashes of despair. And so, if the flames of aspiration flicker within you, if the seeds of compassion yearning to break free from despair find resonance, join me in our continuing journey. Subscribe to Medieval Stories, for here we will arm ourselves not only with knowledge, but with the indomitable spirit of connection and the hope that blooms across battle-scarred fields. Together, let us weave a narrative that echoes down the corridors of history, forever altered by the threads of resilience and empathy. The moments that followed, drenched in an inkling of hope, felt both surreal and electric. The clamor of warfare, once a cacophony of chaos, transformed into a murmur, a gentle tide, ebbing into a cautious silence. A reluctant truce unfolded across the battlefield, and the walls of Antioch stood witness to an extraordinary act of humanity. Warriors from opposing sides, weary and bloodied, exchanged glances. Those once sharpened by animosity were now softened by shared understanding. In that moment of fragile communion, we were no longer enemies. We were men gripped by the same desperate pursuit: survival, honor, and ultimately, peace. With hearts unveiled, we stood upon common ground, riveted by a shared yearning to break free from the chains of our past choices. It was amid this chaos that the aching desire for reconciliation surged forth, a beacon, igniting the embers of our starved souls. I spoke once more, my voice steady amidst the silence. This battle has cost us dearly lives, and futures lie strewn before us like leaves in a storm. But what if we chose not to create further sorrow? What if we vowed to defend our homes together rather than creating graves for our brothers? The faces before me bore the weight of understanding, and I noticed warriors exchanging hesitant glances, assessing one another with curiosity rather than enmity. Like the first light of dawn, breaking through a darkened landscape, the possibility of a new path emerged, woven together by the threads of compassion and solidarity. At that moment, as swords were lowered further and shields discovered new purpose in unity rather than divide, I stepped forward, reaching into the hearts of those who had once been my adversaries. Let this day not be marked by conflict, but by the dawn of a new alliance zone built on the recognition that our homes, our families, our very essence lies on the same precipice. From across the battlefield, a voice rang out, trembling yet resolute. What assurance do we have that this truce will not be shattered by outside forces, the lure of power and vengeance that has gripped us in the past? The voice belonged to a defender of Antioch, his armor reflecting the sun's desperate rays, forging shadows upon the ground. His eyes burned with fear but held the flicker of hope I had sought to ignite. "We must forge a pact," I replied, sensing the profound depth of his concern. "An agreement between men where the promise of peace supersedes the allure of conquest. Let us bind ourselves, not by chains of animosity, but by vows of protection and mutual respect." Murmurs swept through the ranks around us, uncertainty living alongside nascent hope. Observing the hesitance coiling among warriors, I extended my hand toward the Antiochian warrior, a silent invitation to join me in forming this new alliance. The air crackled with tension as he approached, each step weighted by years of conflict and bloodshed. But as our eyes locked, I felt the air thrum with an unspoken understanding, a shared pledge to something larger than ourselves. The warrior grasped my outstretched hand, clenching it firmly. In that profound exchange, a current rippled through the assembly. The silence that had settled grew heavy with anticipation, as if bearing witness to the birth of a singular hope. One by one, men from both sides mirrored our gesture, standing shoulder to shoulder, an unanticipated alliance forged upon the very foundation of commonality, transcending our grievances. From this day forward, I proclaimed, emboldened by their unity, we shall stand as guardians against any force that threatens our lands, our kin, and our sanctity. Let our shared grief remind us of what we can lose, not only our lives, but also our humanity. As murmurs filled the air, a wave of enthusiasm surged, illuminating the somber countenances of those around us. The battlefield, once soaked in regret, transformed into a haven draped with potential. Alliance grew not through coercion, but through honesty shared among weary hearts, tempered by the shared desire to forge a different legacy amid the shadows of war. With that first pledge of unity, the atmosphere around us shifted, opening paths once veiled in darkness. Though we each carried the scars of battles past, new energies ignited within us. A chant of hope surged forth, a chord resonating across the cinders of enmity. What culmination could arise from such a union? While the trembling hands of doubt lingered, a flicker of possibility began to dawn upon us. No longer warriors destined to clash, but rather guardians united in pursuit of serenity. We spoke in hushed tones of rebuilding that which had been lost, of forging new memories amongst the ruins, an extension of our identities beyond the battlefield. As we gathered, narratives of our lives mingled, weaving intricate threads through the tapestry of our newfound camaraderie. Each man shared hallmarks of his journey, relaying stories of love, loss, and sacrifice. Emotions awoke, coursing through our veins, a realization that we were not so different, bound by our shared humanity. Through laughter and tears, we began to understand that the ties which once held our divisions could now form the basis for our alliance. But even as our spirits lifted, the specter of uncertainty remained, a lingering shadow, foreboding and relentless. Whispers of doubt continued to circulate outside the realm of our bond. Not all would accept our newfound alliance, nor would every heart be open to the possibilities we forged amidst wreckage. As we settled into this brief interlude of peace, I sensed remnants of anxiety tracing the edges of our nascent unity. What must we do to ensure the survival of this bond? I pondered aloud, gauging the voices of my companions, hungry to protect what had emerged from the chaos. In response, the Antiochian warrior replied, his voice steady and resolute. We must prepare our defenses not against each other, but against those who may seek to divide us anew. Together, we will train and fortify our lands while spreading the word of our pact far and wide. Truth must resonate beyond this battlefield, igniting the hearts of our kin. A consensus began to form, reinforcing our commitment to transcend the very forces that had kept us at odds. We vowed to gather our allies, not as separate factions, but as a singular community, intent on defending our sanctity and working toward rebuilding a land devastated by discord. And so, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting golden hues across the embers of war, I recognized the swell of hope flourishing within the union we had established. Each man stood committed not only to a truce, but to the promise of kinship, a new legacy rising from the ashes of conflict. With every heartbeat, we took a step closer to the distant horizon, bound together by the conviction that the power of humanity could undo the very fabric of destruction. A commitment forged in anguish, now burned fiercely, promising possibility over despair. In these moments of triumph, remember, it is through unity and understanding that we find our strength. If your heart beats with the spirit of hope, and you feel the call to journey alongside us, subscribe to Medieval Stories. Together, we shall continue to explore the depths of our narratives, unveiling truths that defy boundaries and traverse the annals of history. Let us march forward, hand in hand, reshaping the world one story at a time. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight cascaded across the battlefield, revealing a stark reality, a landscape marred by conflict, but now pulsing with the promise of renewed purpose. The air, heavy with the lingering scent of smoke and blood, began to transform, infused with the scent of wet earth and burgeoning hope. Men who had been lined up as adversaries now stood united, bound by a shared cause as fragile as glass, yet as enduring as steel. We commenced our first collective task under this new alliance, fortifying the defenses of Antioch. The camaraderie forged in the heat of battle now turned toward a more pressing endeavor, fostering an environment of safety and understanding. As I worked side by side with men I had once considered enemies, our hands toiled together, repairing the very walls that had once stood as barriers between us. Stones and timber, like our hearts, were reconstructed to form a steadfast foundation, resilient against the storm of conflict that had swept through our lives. With each stone laid, trust grew within our ranks. We shared stories of our homesteads that flooded the air with laughter, fresh memories of cherished lives left behind momentarily. Men recounted the sweet laughter of children at play, the warmth of hearths alive with kinship, the bittersweet joy of love found and lost. It was in these shared narratives that our humanity emerged, blooming like flowers in cracked soil, developing roots that ran deeper than the conflict that had sought to divide us. Among us was Davud, a skilled craftsman from Antioch, whose hands had built not only the walls we sought to fortify, but also the very essence of community. "We cannot forget the lessons of our past," he urged as he worked alongside me, laboring diligently while imparting his wisdom. "It is easy to succumb to the allure of vengeance, to wield anger as a weapon. Yet, it is far more difficult to choose compassion in the face of adversity, to temper our efforts for peace, for unity." His words resonated deeply within the core of my being. The echoes of battle only seemed to fortify my resolve to impact a future forged through understanding rather than animosity. With every swing of the hammer, every block positioned with care, I visualized a world beyond conflict, a world where the human spirit thrived in harmony. Days turned into weeks, and our alliance solidified. Together, we trained and prepared, not just for potential skirmishes, but for a greater purpose, the need to cultivate a life free of strife. Unity breathed life into the fortress of Antioch, and word of our pact spread beyond its wall-stales of bravery, tempered with humility reaching distant lands. At times, I hosted gatherings under the stars, where we would break bread and share meals, our spirits lifting as we laughed, celebrated our newfound brotherhood, and looked to the heavens for guidance. Song and dance filled the air, intertwining our unique cultures, forging a celebration that resonated powerfully against the backdrop of ruin, a powerful reminder of what we had been before the weight of conflict had consumed us. But shadows of doubt still lingered, their tendrils curling around our aspirations. Whispers of dissent simmered just beyond the fortress walls, or so I felt. In hushed tones, rumors of those unwilling to accept our new path trickled down from the hills, tales of brigands and warlords plotting to crush our fragile alliance beneath their iron grip. One fateful evening, as twilight descended, a council was convened. Leaders from both sides gathered within the stone walls of our once fearful fortress. The hall, alive with voices and fervor, crackled with palpable tension. We cannot turn away from the weight of reality. Mara, a fierce warrior from the Antiochian side, declared, her voice firm as granite. Our world still teeters on the precipice of war. We must prepare. Her words struck me like ice, invoking shivers through shared anticipation. The spirit of hope that had ignited within me seemed threatened by the looming specter of discord that loomed beyond our walls. Yet I could not allow fear to eclipse our victories. I hear the bitter truths, Mara, I replied, turning to face my newfound comrades. But we must not allow the darkness to steal our light. Let us stand firm and train together, preparing not for conflict against an imaginary foe, but for the defense of our unique ideals. Knowledge and armor will not only shield us from external threats, but also nurture the bonds we have strived to create. With my voice echoing against the stone walls, I felt the simmering uncertainty pulse within my chest. Would my words resonate amid the weight of fear gripping their hearts? Yet, one by one, nods of agreement rose like a chorus, affirmations tethering us to the shared convictions that had begun to shape our destinies. We poured ourselves into drills and training, honing not just our skills in battle, but fostering the connection that united our hearts. Every swing of the sword synchronized our purpose. Every drill, a reminder that we were no longer alone in this journey. As we sparred, laughter intertwined with grunts of exertion. The tension bubbled, dissolving barriers, invigorating our bonds with kinship. But even amidst the strengthening ties, a dread gnawed insidiously at the fringes of my mind. One afternoon, as we assembled on the training field, scouts arrived breathless with urgent news, their faces lined with worry. A marauding band approaches intent on quelling our burgeoning alliance. One of them gasped, his eyes wild with alarm. They bring numbers and bloodlust. The murmurs of fear erupted like wildfire, igniting worries that the shield we had painstakingly forged might be threatened. I felt the ground beneath me shift as uncertainty surged through our ranks. We had just begun to stitch together the threads of fecundity, and yet a tempest brewed on the horizon. "Prepare yourselves," bellowed Davoud, stepping forward, clenching his hammer like a torchbearer amidst the storm. "We stand at the northern gates of this fortress together. We hold not just the courage to defend our lives, but the faith to uphold the bonds forged in this sanctuary." The urgency hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the camaraderie we had established. Heartbeats quickened as warriors returned to their posts, tensions rising alongside the adrenaline coursing through our veins. No longer were we merely resolute brothers prepared for training. We were now defenders of a newfound world, our world. As I stood at the northern gates, The shouts and footsteps of warriors coalesced into a powerful chorus, a wave of pulsating energy surging through the ranks as adrenaline ignited our resolve. The stakes had risen, but instead of surrendering to fear, we mustered courage as one imperative force, a mingling of hearts that defied the encroaching darkness. Now was the time to affirm our pact. No longer just a dream entwined in the tapestry of hope, it had become our reality, the very essence that tethered us against the darkness of despair. As the horizon darkened with the approach of the marauders, I clenched my sword, resolute in our shared intention. Fear could no longer overshadow our ambition. We stood prepared to protect not just our lives, but our vision of unity, a beacon of resilience forged amidst the clamor of conflict. If your heart resonates with the spirit of unity rising amidst adversity, join me in this journey of courage, resilience, and hope. Subscribe to Medieval Stories together. We will traverse the path of history, uncovering the truths that reveal our interconnected souls. Let us march forward, not just as warriors, but as custodians of our shared legacy, as we face the shadows that dare to challenge our light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow upon the fortifications of Antioch, the air grew thick with anticipation and trepidation. Word had spread swiftly of the marauding band approaching, their intentions steeped in violence and chaos. We assembled at the northern gate, our hearts heavy yet aflame with determination. If we had emerged from the shadows of despair, what better way to reclaim our future than to stand as one against the encroaching darkness? A cacophony of preparation filled the air warriors, clashing swords against shields, their steely resolve echoing within the stone walls. As I stood amongst my brothers, I could feel the palpable tension coursing through the ranks. The stakes were high. Our shared vision of unity and purpose now hinged on this moment. The embodiment of our dreams clashed against the looming threat, seeking to undo all that we had forged. With unwavering resolve, I stepped to the forefront, my voice rising above the tumult. "We cannot allow fear to poison our unity," I called, catching the gaze of my comrades, their eyes reflecting the fire of our shared triumph. Today we do not merely defend Antioch, we honor the bonds we have forged together. For each life defended is a testament to our resolve, our complexity, and our shared humanity. The battle cry summoned a surge of energy as warriors roared their agreement. The stakes were steep, but in that moment, bound by purpose, we found not just solidarity but the deepest kind of strength. The air grew heavy with anticipation as we readied ourselves. We were not mere individuals, but a force bred from the fires of adversity, a coalition born of courage. As the first cries of the marauders pierced the evening air, I grasped my sword tightly. Shadows cast in the fading light shifted ominously along the distant horizon, growing as the threat approached. Pale forms of men on horseback emerged, wild and unrestrained, charging toward us as if propelled by the fury of the storm. Their intent was clear: to dismantle the fragile bridge we had built, to reclaim control through the pressure of violence. Yet, rather than retreat or descend into a sea of confusion, we held our ground. I turned to Davud, who stood resolute beside me. We will not bend to their will. Instead, we defend what we have built. Not just the walls of Antioch, but the very essence of our humanity. I affirmed. His gaze met mine, filled with a mixture of fear and fierce belief. The marauders broke against our ranks like waves crashing against a rocky shore, fierce and unyielding. I felt the adrenaline rush through me as I met the first of Theban aggressors, swinging wildly, eyes aflame with the promise of destruction. Our weapons clashed violently, their deadly intent tempered by the resolve that ignited within me. Each pulse of my heart resonated with a determination to protect those who stood beside me. As we fought, the din of battle engulfed us. The clash of metal, the shouts of anguished men, and the call of a shared struggle resonated deep within our souls. I shifted my focus not just on the enemy before me, but on the warriors who flanked me, each movement and blow synchronized in the language of survival. We navigated the battlefield together, guarding one another's backs, our bond proving stronger than fear itself. With every foe that fell before us, the energy within our coalition grew. Triumph and unity surged as I witnessed men who had once been strangers now fighting side by side, the purest form of strength interwoven through bonds that had blossomed against the odds. These shared moments of valor fortified the core of what we fought for, a shared identity rising above our previously entrenched grievances. In the heat of battle, I glimpsed Mara skillfully dispatching an enemy, her movements fluid and deft. Her fierce spirit was infectious, drawing men around her even deeper into the fray. We roared a primal release together, standing shoulder to shoulder, giving life to our oft-forgotten humanity amidst the clash of warfare. As the tide of battle ebbed and flowed, I found the strength to confront an incoming barrage of foes. They came at us like a tide, determined to breach our unity and claim our lives mercilessly. Yet, I recalled the essence of our struggle. The harmony we had built within the fortress Walsa means to rise above adversity. With a surge of energy, I rallied a band of warriors near me as we pushed forward, a torrent of resolve sweeping through our collective spirit. I felt the presence of 100 voices whispering in my ears, urging me on, encouraging each shared breath to foster courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It was not merely about winning, but standing firm against the sorrow that had haunted us. For we sought the dawn of understanding in conflict. As dusk turned to night, the battle raged on. I fought fiercely, eyes locked onto those around me, feeling a sense of solidarity during each frantic moment. Yet, in the depths of the chaos, I could still sense the lingering presence of doubt, an insidious whisper, suggesting that this alliance was weak, that we would falter under the weight of hostility. But I would not allow those whispers to consume me. I would instead channel them into my resolve. I thrust my sword against the next opponent, defeating him decisively before charging toward the next. Each blow became a declaration of vow, reaffirming that we would not retreat, but lean into the promise of a shared future free from turmoil. Together, we surged relentlessly, rising above the battle not as satellite soldiers in a pointless war, but as guardians of a vision untarnished by hatred. The fight was more than bloodshed. It became a vivid call to bear witness to the bonds we had forged in the fires of strife. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows, commanding the attention of both sides. A warlord, his armor glinting menacingly under the moonlight, radiating an aura of authority and unrest. The marauders faltered, momentarily distracted, allowing a window of opportunity for a decisive blow. In that charged moment, I locked eyes with my comrades. "Now, brothers, show them our strength!" I shouted, urging them to follow my lead. Our coordinated effort surged forth like a tempest, a tidal wave of blood and fury confronting the warlord's tempestuous presence. The battlefield erupted in a clash of bodies as we pressed toward our common enemy, our spirits entwined in a singular purpose. I couldn't ignore the reality that fear still persisted, but as the echoes of our battle cries rang out under the shards of the night sky, one thing was clear. We were not surrendering our humanity in the face of destruction. We were reclaiming it. If you feel the call to understand how humanity can prevail amidst turmoil and desolation, I invite you to journey alongside me. Subscribe to Medieval Stories, and together we shall unravel the intricacies of our shared past as we equip ourselves with the lessons of resilience and hope, marching forward to a future united against the shadows that threaten our light.